Ragnarök, sound money, and the American reset. Section 1. Some things are not done for immediate benefit. They are done because they are the foundation for something else entirely. That is the whole argument. Civilizations do not collapse first at the visible layer. They collapse at the foundational layer they stop noticing. They collapse when the boring things become invisible and the invisible things become neglected. Out of sight, out of mind. That is how nations drift. Not all at once. Quietly. Then suddenly. Section 2. America did not become America because it had better slogans. It became America because for a long stretch of time, it had a core set of ingredients that made large-scale success possible. Sound money, property rights, contract enforcement, rule of law, productive incentives, a culture that could still recognize restraint, sacrifice, patience, and delayed gratification as virtues rather than punishments. That stack mattered more than the personalities passing through it. That is why the immigrant question is so revealing. If immigrants built America, why didn't they build their own countries? Because human effort by itself is not enough. Talent is not enough. Ambition is not enough. A nation is not built by energy alone. It is built when energy enters a structure that can amplify it. The same man can struggle in one environment and flourish in another, not because he changed species, but because the operating system changed. The coreset changed. The sequence changed. The order of operations changed. Section 3. That is what most people miss. They stare at the output and ignore the stack. They praise the skyscraper and ignore the steel frame. They celebrate prosperity and ignore the monetary discipline, legal architecture, and cultural software that made prosperity possible in the first place. And once those foundations work well enough, they disappear from public consciousness. They become assumed, then they become neglected, then they become political bargaining chips, then they become casualties. That is where America is now. The deepest rot is not that people disagree. The deepest rot is that the country has abandoned foundational constraints and replaced them with managerial improvisation. The loudest exhibit is sound money. You can say whatever you want about policy, presidents, parties, demographics, or media narratives. But one of the clearest signs of civilizational drift is when a society severs itself from monetary discipline and then acts surprised when debt, speculation, institutional bloat, and short-termism spread into everything else. Sound money is not just an economics preference. It is civilizational architecture. It is a restraint on power. It is a check on fantasy. It is a signal to the state that there are limits. Once that anchor is removed, every other distortion gets easier. Debt becomes easier. Political bribery becomes easier. Kicking the can becomes easier. Wealth illusion becomes easier. Time preference gets corrupted. People stop building for durability and start optimizing for extraction. That is how you end up staring at tens of trillions in national debt and still pretending the problem is merely cosmetic. No, the debt is not the disease by itself. It is a symptom, a giant, vulgar symptom. It is what happens when a nation treats the foundational layer like an afterthought. And this is where the Ragnarök metaphor earns its place. This content is brought to you by Bobby Giggs. Promote your brand here and reach a wide audience across platforms like YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Follow the links in the description to get started. Section 4. Ragnarök is not merely doom. It is not just spectacle. It is the destruction of a brittle order that can no longer justify itself. In Norse myth, the world burns, floods, and breaks. Gods fall, structures collapse. But the story does not end in pure annihilation. It ends in renewal. Survivors remain, seeds remain. The world returns, not untouched, but reset. That is the point. Ragnarök is not punishment for its own sake. It is cleansing. It is pruning. It is what happens when accumulated distortions can no longer be maintained. The old order does not negotiate its way into immortality. It breaks, and only then can something cleaner emerge. That is the American parallel. Section 5. For too long, America has relied on inherited foundations while actively corroding them. It has enjoyed the prestige of the old stack while hollowing out the discipline that sustained it. It has wanted the fruit without the root, liberty without restraint, prosperity without sacrifice, reserve currency privilege without monetary credibility. empire-scale influence without imperial consequences. It cannot work forever. And yet, this is where the discussion becomes more important than simple doom posting, because the answer is not nihilism. The answer is visibility. If foundations are invisible when they work, then they must be made visible on purpose. They must be named, monitored, defended, audited, and renewed. In other words, the blueprint must be open-sourced. Section 6. Imagine treating the American system not like sacred mythology, but like critical infrastructure, a live stack, something with modules, dependencies, thresholds, failure points, and maintenance requirements. Sound money would not be a vague talking point, it would be a monitored base layer. Rule of law would not be reduced to partisan preference, it would be appraised as a structural necessity. Institutional bloat would trigger alarm bells. Civic decay would be measured. Incentives would be examined. Parameters would be debated openly, not buried under ritualized talking points. 1,000 eyes on every foundation. Because what a civilization cannot see, it cannot protect. And what it does not protect, it eventually loses. Section 7. This is why empire always carries a hidden trap. Empire offers order, but often at the cost of liberty. It centralizes, it standardizes, it censors. It imposes one-size-fits-all rules in the name of stability. At first, this looks efficient. In periods of chaos, command and control feels like relief. But over time, the machinery of order begins to suppress the very energies that allow a civilization to renew itself. Dissent, experimentation, open inquiry, distributed intelligence, and local adaptation. Then the order becomes brittle. Then truth gets hidden. Then the system becomes dependent on narrative management rather than genuine health. That, too, is a Ragnarök condition. Section 8. So here is the pinpoint position. America's Ragnarök is coming, not as doom, but as necessary cleansing. We will return to sound money and the core set of foundational ingredients that would make America great again, or we will not rise again. That is the line. Not because nostalgia is enough, not because slogans are enough, but because a civilization cannot be renewed at the surface if the base layer remains corrupted. The real reset will not come from cosmetics. It will come from reordering the stack, from returning to first principles, from restoring monetary discipline, from remembering that prosperity is downstream of structure, from understanding that greatness was never magic, it was architecture. And architecture once neglected must either be repaired deliberately or rediscovered through fire. Section 9. That is where America stands, not merely in decline, but at the edge of reckoning. Not merely in crisis, but in confrontation with forgotten foundations. Not merely facing collapse, but facing the possibility that collapse is the doorway through which renewal must pass. That is Ragnarök, and that is the American reset.